It's amazing how after weeks of preparation for Christmas and all the effort that goes into getting ready, how quickly, after December 25th, we pack it all up and store it away until next year. And the liturgical calendar of the church is not much help either. 15 days ago, we celebrated Christmas, and today, according to the liturgical calendar, we should be celebrating the baptism of the Lord Sunday. Jesus' baptism not as an infant, but presumably at about 30 years old. Jesus is born, then all of a sudden Jesus is an adult, and for the most part, we know nothing about what happened in between. Though we do know almost nothing about what happened during Jesus' childhood, we've learned over the years, when a child is born, the things that happen in the early days of life, the growth that occurs in those first months, the child's experiences in those early years do indeed shape the adult the child will become. I was talking to Mark Cook last week, the night before he boarded a plane to go to LA, where he will spend the better part of the next 6 weeks. I think he was pretty excited about the job before him in the coming weeks. But what he really talked about was how he'd only be here at home 4 days in the next 6 weeks, how he wasn't sure, but he was trying to work things out for a way for Camille and Theodore to join him and be with him in LA for at least part of the time, because as Mark said, a lot of growing happens in that time. And of course, Theodore is under 2, and a lot of growing does happen during that time. And I suspect a lot of growing and shaping and influencing of all kinds also happened during Jesus' childhood and youth. And it's the author of Matthew who is the only one who provides us with any perspective on the very early years of the Jesus story as the very young child, a toddler really, some weeks or months after the birth, lives his life, this shaping, very formative time of Jesus' life. Now, we freely include the first part of the story in the Christmas pageants and our Christmas Eve celebrations and our Christmas Day celebrations, even though, according to Matthew, this part of the Jesus story may have come as long as nearly 2 years after Jesus' birth. You know the story. The wise ones from the east, or the Magi, or the astrologers, those who study the stars, follow a star to Bethlehem, stopping on the way in Jerusalem to ask Herod the whereabouts of this new ruler of the Jewish people, the people over whom Herod rules. Herod, alarmed at this possible threat to his power, sets out to get some answers, checking with everyone who might know about this event. Then Herod sends these travelers on their way to Bethlehem with instructions. Go find this child. Get detailed information about him. Then report back to me so that I too can go honor this new ruler to be. Next comes the most familiar part. The astrologers travel on, following a star until it stops over a place where Jesus is with his mother in a house where the family apparently is living. These visitors honor the child, kneeling before him, presenting their special gifts. Traditionally, there are 3 wise ones, or magi, or astrologers. Tradition tells us this, I suppose, because there are 3 named gifts, but the text mentions nothing about 3 people. For all we know, several people brought gold, and a bunch more brought frankincense, and another group brought myrrh, and some might have even thought to bring some diapers, pull-ups, and training pants like our children collected for cots this morning, or maybe even a warm blanket, a children's parchment scroll, some nutritious food, and maybe even a colorful toy for Jesus' comfort, sustenance, and mental stimulation. Then the story takes a turn, and things get intense. This is the part we leave out of our Christmas pageants. In fact, we seldom, if ever, give any attention to the next parts of the story. Maybe because the liturgical calendar rushes us so quickly to adult Jesus, or maybe because we just don't like this part. It's too unsettling, too disturbing, too brutal and cruel for how we want to think of Christmas. Or maybe this part of the story tells us things about the world, about life, maybe even about ourselves and about Jesus, things we don't really want to know, things we'd rather ignore. For whatever reason, we generally skip over the next verses, pretending they simply are not there, or they're too hard to understand, or somehow they're irrelevant to the story of the Christ child. So we ignore this part of the story, relieved that we don't have to think about such vengeful violence, especially so close to Christmas, when we want to keep that peaceful, joyful feeling, continue the smiles and friendly greetings, basking in the warmth and glow of our Christmas togetherness. We don't like to think about the dream of the astrologers warning them, do not report back to Herod. Take an alternative route home. We don't want to be reminded of Herod's hatred, fear, and anger so strong and out of control, the destruction and murder of children are the order of the day. We liked the dreams about Jesus' pending arrival into our world, about Mary and Joseph preparing for marriage, about getting ready to become parents. Now, we're less excited about Joseph's dream, a warning dream to take Mary and Jesus and escape to Egypt in order to protect this young child from death at Herod's insidious command. We're not inclined to do pageants about Joseph getting up in the middle of a deep sleep, waking Mary and Jesus, and fleeing under cover of night, leaving everything behind, making their way as best they could, becoming exiles, refugees in a strange land, uncertain of when, if ever, they might return home. Herod, furious the astrologers ignores his instructions and never return, sends out the troops with orders to kill all little boys living in and around Bethlehem who are 2 years old and younger, all those born since Jesus' birth, just to be sure the Christ child indeed is murdered. The child's, Jesus' life is of so little value. In fact, the lives of all the baby and toddler boys in the entire region were of so little value to Herod, they were easily expendable in Herod's quest to maintain his control and power. He couldn't care less about these kids, only about protecting himself and his own way of life.